came to Egypt to hang out for a minute, and I started playing the blues because this guy is so smelly and he's bumming me out. Starting on the B7 and taking a B triad. I'm sweeping across all three strings and then dipping into the tremolo bar with the right hand. Going into a diminished scale, adding some tension over the A7. Going from the 13th to the flat 7, the flat 5 to the 5, flat 3 to the 3. That's a real out note. That would be the flat 9, just to add a little more tension. Then I land on the major third when we hit the E. And then for the final B, doing arpeggio tones, the major third to the root. Here I'm bending the major third to the 4th and back. I'm doing a little series on blues turnarounds right now, and I'll probably do a half a dozen, maybe a dozen, who knows, riff ideas that can give you an insight into how to take on the turnarounds. And blues, if you're not familiar with it, is a musical form that is generally 12 bars long, sometimes 16, sometimes there's an oddball form, but generally it's 12. And there's generally 3 chords involved. Although it's a dominant chord, it's referred to as the 1 chord in the blues in this key of E would be E. The 4 chord, you would go up a 4th, and that would be A7. The 5 chord, B7. And it's usually on the turnarounds that you add the most tension to build the story, and then it would release on the 1 chord. So build, build, build on the 5, maybe even build more on the 4, and then release on the 1. And oftentimes it'll go back to the 5 for a bar or maybe just a couple of beats, depending on the tune. to add a little bit of more tension before the beginning of the 12 bars starts over again on the E7. This section is for people that might not know anything about music theory or the mechanics of music. You might be a great player. You might be able to take off songs from records great and already play in a band. But when I start talking in this riff series about numbers, like the first, the third, the fifth, the flat five, the minor third, the flat seven, it all comes from a scale. If I'm playing a major scale, like A major Ionian mode, it's all numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And 8 becomes 1 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I've got 1, 2, 3, and I'm talking about a flat third, then this third will go down a half step. If I'm talking about a 7, a flat 7 would be a half step lower. Same with the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Flat 5 is going to be a half step lower. Or a sharp 5, half step higher. When I talk about an arpeggio is just a chord, really, played one note at a time. So if I have an A major 7 chord, and I play it one note at a time, that's an arpeggio. Striking it all together is a chord, separate is an arpeggio. If I'm going to play an E minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, here's an E minor 7. I'm going to flat that 5. Sometimes when I talk about bending, I'll go by steps. So half step bend, if I'm going to go from here, you want to make sure not to overbend and do a whole step or somewhere between a half step and a whole step. So it's a good idea when you're practicing bends to play the note that is your target first, because you get that in your ear and then bend up until you hear it. Sometimes I'll get into a minor third bend. Sometimes the bends are just very subtle. I'm not even thinking half step or whole step. I'm just thinking of making some kind of movement on the string. Some of the techniques I'll be talking about are sweeps. If I have 3 notes that are lined up on a string, or even 2 notes, I'm going to just take an A major triad for this example. Rather than the right hand going down, up, down, if I sweep it, it means my right hand is going all downstrokes in the same direction. And there's a kind of a subtle angle change in my hand where, check out the right hand if I'm doing alternate picking. If I'm sweeping, if I'm doing upstrokes, I'll angle it the other way slightly. When I talk about double stops, it just means 2 notes at the same time. So, like, sometimes I will bend into double stops. Like I'm going to bend the C to D and grab this G. A reverse bend means that you do the bend first and then let it drop. So if this is my target note, I'll bend up to that first, and then I don't pick until it's already bent and let it drop. That was a half step bend. And a lot of times when I bend, this thumb is going to be over the top to help me grip. If I'm going to be doing some stretches. The thumb is dead center in the back of the neck, because if your thumb is up here, it really constricts your movement. But if your thumb's in the back, you can get a lot bigger spread.